Nonlinear editors, this video is about DaVinci Resolve Studio version 16. It's a big and powerful application that can't be reviewed or described in one video. For reference, the manual, which is available in PDF form, has over 3,500 pages. What I'm showing you today is how I used Studio to color correct and grade the footage I shot with the Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K for my review of that camera. I've provided a link to my review in the description. Resolve Studio is a paid upgrade to Resolve, which is available for free. The camera comes with a license key for the application. You can do most of what I'm showing you with the free version. Studio unlocks some higher res outputs and a few other high-end capabilities. Now, obviously, the Blackmagic RAW footage from the 6K provides a great starting point. RAW footage provides more leeway to adjust exposure and color than the compressed formats found in most cameras, which are based on H.264 compression with the settings baked in. But you don't need the Blackmagic camera to take advantage. Resolve works with any recording, both as an editor and as a color correction tool. Now, I'd recommend that if it is of interest to you, you download the free version first. There's an excellent set of tutorials available in the beginner's guide, and it takes some time to get through all of the chapters. However, that will give you a good sense of the depth and breadth of this NLE, not just for color correction and grading. Well, let's start by creating a project and importing the files I shot for the review of the cinema camera. Actually, import is slightly misleading. The files are not imported into the project, they're just linked. Here's the first scene, shot in the studio. I'll create a timeline for these shots, and there's the same flat image we saw in camera. In the Project Master Settings page, I set 4K DCI at 24 frames per second, as that will be the final resolution to upload to YouTube. Color Management setting is DaVinci YRGB Color Managed, which enables me to set the input color space to 6K Film Gen 4. Output is Rec. 709, which suits the screens most of us are watching. Lots more panels and options to consider. I'm accepting the defaults. Many of these require an advanced technical understanding and provide the opportunity for a video's worth of explanation. So if the scene looked dull, applying the 6K setting immediately transformed the image, so let's go to work on that. Resolve's modes are selected across the bottom. On the color screen, the lower area contains the adjustment palettes. On the left, I'm starting with the camera settings, and on the right, I've selected the waveform display in mono. While I'm used to 0 to 100 IRE units, here the display shows 10-bit values. Now, in the reduced dynamic range of Rec. 709, my hair is clipped. That's obvious in the image and on the waveform. I can lower the exposure about 1.4 stops, which restores the detail. Alternately, the ISO can be reset by the same amount with the same result. There is no processing difference between these two. I'm switching from waveform to parade, which confirms what I suspected. The color balance is slightly too warm. All the shadow tones should be the same on the red, green, and blue channels. That's also confirmed on the levels panel. The blue shadow values don't line up. 3 ways to adjust this. Use the slider, or with the cursor over the numerical value, use the mouse to drag back and forth, or just enter a value. As that's more precise, I'm going to go down to 4400, which looks good, although now there's a slight blue cast in the white box frame right. We'll get back to that. I am trying to balance both the technical analysis with the scopes and waveforms with a visual check on the image. I find it easier to get into the range by using the sliders and dials and then fine-tuning by adjusting the numerical values. Now that we have our starting point, Switching to the color wheels lets us start fine-tuning. 3 versions of this adjustment panel: primaries wheels from left to right, lift, gamma, gain, and offset, which on the log panel are called shadow, midtone, highlight, and offset. That might be a little easier terminology. The middle panel is bars, which simplifies the color tuning. But only the primaries wheels have black and white point tools. Using the black point tool, we can see the color values on the black sweater are all pretty close. The white point tool shows the blues are a little high. Exposure first. I want this scene to look dark, but unlike Tim's sweater in the Apple Watch 6 launch video, I want to keep some detail in the sweater. With my cursor over the dial under the shadow control, I'm going to lower shadow levels until the parade hits 0 and then crush slightly, keeping some detail on my left shoulder, say -10. That's the exposure where I want. Here's the before and after. And I'm going to label the first node where those adjustments are saved as exposure, and add a second node for color. Let's see if we can reduce that slight blue cast in the white box screen right using the bars. Just a slight tweak to 0.95. Although color saturation of the tin and the color chart in the background are good, I prefer a little less saturation in my skin tone. Using the controls under the bars, an overall saturation control desaturates both. But on the alternate controls, Color Boost is designed to increase saturation of low saturation objects while leaving saturated objects alone. Now, reducing this has the opposite effect and reduces skin saturation without affecting the other objects. -15. That's too much. So back up until it looks right. Now, I'm finding that a useful strategy. Reduce until you can see you've overdone it and then back off. We can do a before-after check on node 2. Maybe that's still a little much. -10? Yes. Note that those settings will only work for this image. Applying them to your image likely won't provide good results, and that this image is the result of my creative decisions for this neutral look that I prefer for my videos. And there are literally dozens of ways to get to those results. If I disable the exposure node and add an alt exposure node, with the levels panel, adjust the shadows by sliding the 0 point to the right and increase my face slightly by first clicking on a darker area, which creates a control point at the right spot on the line, and then adjusting the curve up slightly. Now we have 2 exposure adjustments with a similar adjustment. Well, let's move on to the window lit scene. With the LUT applied, it's overexposed. Lowering the ISO to 125 helps, but reducing the exposure by 0.5 gets the waveform and histogram into line. Skin tone is slightly dark, using the same technique, but with a smaller adjustment this time, and again a minor tweak to the color boost. As I get more experience and more familiar, it's getting easier and faster, and it's quite impressive how much control DaVinci provides. But I'm thinking that I'm spending time undoing the effects of the LUT. So I'm going to create a second project and import these clips again, this time without applying the import LUT for the flat log recording of Blackmagic RAW. You can see on the levels in the waveform that the dynamic range of this scene doesn't go below 128. Adjusting the 0 point fixes that to darken the shadows, and the white shirt under 768 should be closer to 1023, and that's the exposure node done. For the color node, bumping the saturation and lowering the color boost creates exactly what my inner creative director is looking for. Same with the window lit scene. The exposure is improved just by bringing the 0 point up. For the color node, the orange vest needs a little more saturation. 65 is too much, so 60 should do it. All done. For those with greater creative needs, you can go on to add more nodes with the color grading adjustments to add mood and atmosphere. I'll leave it to you to determine what those are for your scenes. The Windows scene appears twice in the video, so to copy any of these settings to the second clip, copy the node and paste the node. Then create a second node and paste it from the first clip. When the clips are adjacent, the menu has options to apply the grade from 1 or 2 clips prior, and a completed grade or look can be saved for reuse in other projects or for sale. Right-click on the scene with the settings you want to capture and use the Generate 3D LUT option. And this LUT now appears in the LUT browser. This is the outdoor scene I intentionally shot wide to demonstrate stabilization. The sizing panel reframes it, adding a zoom and a tilt setting. Note that these settings are not captured in a node. I'll add stabilization in a sec. Let's do exposure and color first. Well, after making similar exposure and color adjustments to bring this outdoor scene into line, it's clear that at over 900 on the waveform, my skin tone is too light. I'll add a third node to adjust that. In the window panel, first, I'm adding a circle over my face to isolate the adjustment. Size, shape, position, and edge softness can all be set. Then, using the color wheels, I adjusted the gamma, about -12, a quick before and after check to verify. Now, because this shot was handheld, my face doesn't stay in the same spot. Using the tracker window, I can add motion tracking for this circle with 5 parameters: pan, tilt, zoom, rotate, and 3D. Play through to set the tracking points. It's losing my left edge in a tree, so reset and try that again with just pan and tilt. That seems to work better. To stabilize, the tracker panel has a stabilizer mode. The Stabilize button starts the analysis, playing the clip and tracking the motion. When it's done, the scene crops in and we can play to check the results. You can make adjustments to cropping ratio, smooth, and strength, or select camera lock for maximum stabilization. That requires a restabilization with better results. Now, these adjustments aren't saved in a node either. I was provided the studio license with a physical key device, which I was allowed to use for only 2 weeks. That did not provide sufficient time to master the editing tools in Resolve Studio. This video and the review of the camera were edited in Final Cut. And I should also note that the examples and settings used in this video were created separately and may not correspond directly to the scenes used in my review of the 6K Cinema Camera. I also had to return the camera before recording this video. This footage was shot with the Fujifilm X-H1. Now, always remember to keep going until your memory card is full and your battery is empty. And if you have questions or comments, I enjoy interacting with you. Please post your relevant questions and civil comments below. Finally, I'd like to thank all of my subscribers. It's so nice to know that I have your support. And if you are thinking about subscribing, remember that if you act now, it's free and there's no obligation. Well, now or later. Thanks for watching.